preguntas, o el que pueda hacerlo en inglés, genial. Entonces voy a introducir, it's my pleasure and it's an honor to introduce our speaker, Dominique Campbell. Dominique Campbell is a cultural producer interested in the effects on society of creativity and aging at scale. As a creative agent international, he works from the Irish Republic on long-term strategies to align our understanding of aging with contemporary experience. He specializes in the use of celebration as a strategy for transformation. He has been recognized by the Irish Times amongst key cultural influencers in Ireland and by Next Avenue as a key influencer on aging in the US. And now Dominic will give us the presentation entitled Art, Creativity, and Brain Health. Dominic, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Very nice to see you all and meet you here in Santiago, but also online. So give me a wave if you're online. I can roughly see you. And give me a wave if you're in the room. Firstly, before I start, I'd like to remind you that this is not television. This is real life. And so I'd like to thank the people for helping us to get online. Fantastic. And what I'd like to do is just to give you a little bit of an introduction to the sort of work that I do and why we do it. And then also to invite you to join in conversation. So I think the learning happens in the conversation. So, Claudia, thank you for the introduction. I am Dominique Campbell. I work in very many different ways, in different places, but I work from the Republic of Ireland. And I work mostly through creative work. I use creativity as a strategy for living longer better. Now that we face the challenges of people with extended lives, which some people talk of as a challenge, but I'd like to think of as a miracle. We live in an age of miraculous longer lives. So my father died at 72, but his father died at 65, and I am 57. There is this huge change in life expectancy within my lifetime. Where I live in Ireland, that makes me sort of middle-aged. But if I get on a plane and I travel to South Africa, all of a sudden, just by the fact that I land in a different country, I'm instantly an older man. I'm in the older population. So this is a complicated series of challenges that some people look at through science, that some people look at through arts. And what I try to do is combine them, to find places and ways that they combine by asking a simple question about how do we live longer better. How do we make health? So I'm going to show you a few slides if I can get this to work. And I'm also going to talk a little and ask you questions. I thought today we'd start with some philosophy. So I'm going to share a bit of Snoopy and Charlie Brown, which I think you can see online. If you can't, Charlie Brown and Snoopy are sitting looking out over a lake. Charlie Brown is saying, with the wisdom of a 10-year-old boy, someday we'll die, Snoopy. It's terrible. And his pet dog is saying, yeah, but on all the other days we don't. It's a fantastic way of thinking about how we live. And my background really is a carnivalista, a masquerader. This is what I used to do in my 20s. I made carnival costumes in the Caribbean and in London, and I loved what happens during a carnival. And for the rest of my life, these events got bigger and more complicated. And in the early 2000s, I found myself running the St. Patrick's Festival in Dublin, which was Ireland's national celebration. This is a celebration that we could bring 1.25 million people into the capital city for 5 days of partying. We could broadcast it really before the internet to 23 million people around the world, and it made a lot of money for the city in a short space of time through celebration. We closed the city for a party. We reimagined what the city could be used for. So in places that people would go to work, we went to party. In places that people wouldn't go to because of the stories that people told themselves about that difficult neighborhood, we made events happen that brought many, many people to those areas. But St. Patrick's Festival started not in Dublin, it started in New York. It started because migrating populations would walk down the streets of New York in a procession to say, I exist and I am here. I am a strong person in this world that I've been moved to. And within the festival in Ireland, we commissioned artists to work with particularly young people from difficult postcodes, from hard, difficult areas of the city. And they would dress in costume, transformed, and they would walk down the street as a king or a queen. And they owned the city. They had a place and a purpose and a meaning. And really, that way of thinking about health and about well-being is what I've started to do for the rest of possibly for the rest of my life. So what that helps us think about is how do we make health in this world? Amongst medics, we call that saltogenesis. I can never say the word. Salutogenesis. So quite often people think in medical worlds about what makes us sick. What I'm asking people to do is to think the other way around. What are those things that make us healthy, that make us healthier, that make us healthier across a life course? Early years development to late life flourishing. And we find that some of those things are unexpected. They are not just biology, they're biology in context. They are a sense of joy. They are agency, the ability to make decisions. They are connectivity. Am I connected to people? Am I seen? Am I recognized? And their playfulness. The brain, as the neuroscientists among us know, likes new things, likes to make new patterns. It likes to rest, but it likes the excitement of making new things. And all of those together we can do through creative practices and processes. Sometimes these are individual journeys. There are things that an individual doesn't know. Sometimes they are group or bigger processes and projects. So here's where I think next gets fun. We work quite often, wherever we are in the world, in a world that's made from the dreams of our grandparents. They dreamt the kind of environments that we work in and the healthcare systems that we offer systems. They do some things really, really well. So where I live in Ireland, for instance, they are fantastic at fixing broken bones. So you go into a hospital, use visual prop, and you get your broken bone fixed, and you come back out. They are fantastic for broken bones. They're okay for internal organs. They're not so good for different kinds of conditions. Conditions like a mental health condition or a neurodegenerative condition. Often those conditions associated with older age. So you might go into the hospital and come back out and nothing much changes. So we have a challenge. We have a challenge for our grandchildren. What are our dreams of a healthcare system? And how can we make that for them? And my way of doing this is to work through festivals. Because moving a healthcare system is a big and slow process. So, in Ireland, to give you an example, about 20 years ago, I started an event called the Bealtaine Festival. Bealtaine Festival is a national celebration of creativity as we age. It puts older people at the center of all the projects. Older people come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. The Rolling Stones fill stadiums and are older people. But other older people, their geography might be the table on their hospital bed. It might be their room in a care centre or their house, or the one room. Or maybe they can go as far as the communal living room or maybe they can go to the village centre, or they can go on a national tour. So all sorts of people fitted into one festival, to one event. And over time, that event grew. So we made art with people wherever they were, whether they were in hospitals, whether they were in healthcare, whether they were living independently, whether they were big, always engaged in the arts, whether it was new to them. And over time, the event grew to involve about 212,000 people, which in Ireland, because we're a small population, is about 20% of the population over the age of 65. So it's a significant number of people involved in saying, how do I want to grow old? What's important in my life? How do I want, what makes me healthy? What contributes to me feeling happier, longer, and better? And gradually over time, that spilled out. So it became recognized that working through culture is a way that you can create a different kind of health system. Perhaps one that works less like this, like that, than one that works this way, where you can dip in and dip out of a pharmacology system, of a system that uses biological research, one based on connectivity and culture. And so, in a way, the festival is like a prototype for a lasting way of living, for a lasting way of creating care through many different types of agencies. And we think, when we start new projects now, about that as the fingers on a hand. We think that you need all of these to make a new sort of system. You need creatives, because you need new ideas, new ways of thinking. You need communities, because particularly in old age, solutions are very geographically specific. Health is made by contact. You need colleges, universities. You need people that do thinking, that spend a lot of time thinking in different ways. You need the civic space, and you need commercial. Commercial because they think and act fast, and civic because they think and act slowly. And so if you're looking at the impact of water, you need civic, and if you're thinking of doing something next week, quite often you need commercial. But also these work in different economies, and so having different economies on one project helps to move an idea along. But what's key is this bit, which is care. If you don't build these events around care, then you're just making a product. You're not making something that has lasting benefit, I think. So, one of the questions you have to ask if you build a festival that grows like this is about who gets to make art or create it. What kind of art? Where's it made? Who's it made by? So, within a festival program, you would have the national something on the big stages, or you would have the museum program. You would have the building that has the columns and the red rope. Yeah. You would have the local project, and you have somebody who's making an experiment for their first time. And over time, that's become more important in the work of creative aging internationally. So, I'm going to jump a few slides to show you what I hope I don't jump too many slides. This is not television. Now, let's see if I get this to work. Theory, I do that. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay, we have 7. No.
No,
Now the interesting thing is, how do I make that stop?
¿cómo no va a emocionar?
One sec.
¿Y tú nos emocionas a nosotros? Bailando también. Hay que coger la punta, ¿verdad? Exacto.
Oh, yeah. That's okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. That's okay. It's good. So videos like that one, I think, ask all sorts of questions for people like me, and perhaps for you. They ask what's going on in the brain. That somebody who was I love that video because on YouTube it says former ballerina before, but she's still a ballerina. She just dances differently. So it asks questions of what's going on in the brain. It asks questions of what we think art is, who gets to make it, what, when, why, and where. But it also asks questions about context. So if I see that in a residential care home and I don't understand, I don't have the music, for instance, then what do I think I see? And so festivals are a fantastic platform for putting these ideas before the public. What they're also fantastic for is making new relationships, new networks between different ways of thinking. So, in somewhere like here at the university, what I realize is quite often the disciplines work like this. Yeah? People are very specialized within their discipline, but the problems work like this. And so, the festival is a moment in time, but increasingly what I do is think about the moment in time of the festival and the long tail. So not only what makes the festival happen, the 5 fingers, the moment in time, but then what lasts afterwards. So for the last 7 years, I have been a fellow of the Global Brain Health Institute, and that's put me into conversation with people who are clinical linguists, who are biological neuroscientists, who are biological engineers, all these people with special ideas that I had no idea existed. And now what we try to do is to look at, firstly, how do we talk together? So when we first started, the scientists would sit this side of the table, and maybe me and the journalist would sit on the other side, would look at each other, and they would listen to me talk, and all they could hear was unicorns and butterflies. It didn't sound real. Yeah? It took a long time to work out how do we bridge those divides. And it took many quick projects and little wins to start to get to a different kind of conversation. And that is one of the reasons that I get to talk to you today. What came from those conversations are fantastically rich and important questions that are shaping what we are now trying to do. So those questions include things like the patient's voice. If I have a neurodegenerative condition, if I am old, as I said at the beginning, one day we are going to die. In an acute healthcare system, we try to fix things all the time, but there is a point in our life journey that we can't fix. So, what happens here, and what happens to the people that work in an acute health system, which constantly try to fix things that cannot be fixed? We're going to die. So how do we live well and live well? That last part. And to do that, we really have to ask patients. We have to ask the people that we work with. We have to ask what makes your life rich and worth living and valuable in this part of your life. That is a cultural question. It's a question that we explore through painting or through dancing or through movement or through writing or through story. And so we are trying to work out how we explore all of those conversations. How do we live better for longer? How might we die well? What happens in between? With all the intelligences that we can bring into the conversation. And one of the things that I can bring that is useful for scientists is that projects like that are very media friendly. We like watching those videos. They give us great emotions, lots of crying in my projects. But if we only have the crying and we don't have the actions afterwards, then it's like eating too much sugar when you're a small child. You're very excited and nothing else happens. And then you eat more sugar, you get very excited, nothing else happens. So, how do we fit them all together? We do things like this. I come at the invitation of the University of Adolfo Urbana's of Brainlab. I talk about the things that I do. I listen, which is what I'm about to do. And you get to ask me questions, and I try to answer them as honestly as I can. And many of them I may not be able to, because this is so new. 2 weeks ago, the WHO put out its first position paper on brain health. GBHI is 6 years old. Brainlab is 2 years old. It's new. It's moving very quickly. And brain health is a fantastic framework for a new way of thinking. So, where do we want to take it next? I might end by just talking about a few things that I'm doing. So, I get to do this, I talk, that's very nice. I get to share information. What I'm doing at the moment is we're creating a new website, which will open in November, I hope, called artsandbrain.com. And we're trying to bring together examples of fantastic practice, great projects, creatively driven, from initially Latin America, Ireland, and the UK. Very short explanations, maybe a little video, a little bit of film, short explanation, so that those people that make those projects can see each other. They can be recognized, they can see that they are not alone, that the people that do those projects in Chile, and the people that do those in Argentina, people that do those in Birmingham, England, or Cork, Ireland, can see that there are other people like them doing the same sort of work in different parts of the world. And we can start a conversation across countries from those projects that are project driven. But what we're also doing is around that project connecting the scientists and the civics and the people that can think about this in a longer and bigger way. So the arts moves very quickly, can make a thing today, can make a thing now. But we need to work in collaboration with people and organizations that can sustain those ideas as systems. Yeah, and that's really what I wanted to do with this session. You can find out more at creativeaging.com, sorry, creativeaginginternational.com. We're always interested in talking to people and starting a conversation. So that's what I'd like to do now. I thank you for listening, wherever you are in this room or out there in digital land. This is not television, so please. Hear it?
Okay. Dominic, thanks very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. You talked about reimagining cities, and that's something that I'm very much interested in as well. Most people are going to, in the world, are going to live in cities in the next 20 years. Something like 75% of people will live in cities. I wonder if you're worried about the future. I don't see cities improving particularly, but I see great opportunity. So you reimagine cities. It's something I try to do, and I wonder whether people take you seriously. I struggle for people to take me seriously when I have when I want to change the norm. I don't know if you know about the ciclovia in Latin America. Ciclovia is probably the best public health intervention in the world, and hopefully on Sunday you'll get to take part. Before the COVID pandemic, more than 400 cities in Latin America closed the streets on Sunday so people could exercise. In Bogota, in Colombia alone, more than 1.5 million people take part in each ciclovia every Sunday, and they do it because it makes them happier. One of the main reasons for taking part. Here in Santiago, on average, 40,000 people take part in every ciclovia on Sundays as well. I don't know why nobody's taking it more seriously, and hopefully we can work together to get more funding and do some more research. It should be in every city in the world. Here, the ciclovia is privately funded, no money at all from the state. So you talk about good healthcare systems. I'm not sure that's the case universally. In Colombia, the healthcare system is rubbish as well, despite what they might tell you. Here, only the rich have good healthcare. So, yeah, I wonder then, if we can talk about the ciclovia over lunch, and then my question for now is, are you worried about the future of living in cities?
We had a fantastic conversation about this yesterday. And the conversation started like this. It said, it was a conversation with regional authorities, and they were talking about money, because they have to talk about money. They are in charge. And they said, how much does it cost? How do you budget for this? How do you make this? And let's say that. Let's look at it a different way. If you look around any city and you look at the development of buildings, those buildings are on a 25-year financial cycle. Yeah, those buildings don't pay back the developer for at least 25 years. We think about health on a 25-year cycle. By doing a small number of things now, you will have a huge impact in the future. In essence, you're paying it forward. So sometimes that's difficult on a political cycle, 5 years. But that's why I think this collaboration across different organizations is important. Yeah, there are days I walk into rooms and people look at me like I have 19 heads, and there's complete incomprehension. And then there are days when that doesn't happen. But it's really important that when we go into those meetings, we take off the uniform of the organization that we arrive in with. We have to be there because we represent an institution or organization. Yeah, that's why we're invited in. But it's important that we also can put that slightly to one side, because this aging isn't about somebody else. It's about everybody, just later in time. Those conditions that are associated with old age, that's us later. So if we don't do something about that, we can plot out the logic. Where I think it gets fascinating and really interesting, and why brain health is such an interesting concept, is because the biology doesn't exist without the context. And the context is the landscape in which you live, the built environment, the quality of the air, the quality of the water, and the quality of the human relationships. And so there are examples, a little like the one you mentioned, popping up all around the world. They are always driven by people and groups, and community-driven, I suppose. And I think that's great. I think the rebalancing is the challenge. How do we make an ecology of health? What's that ecology involve? And yesterday we were driving through Valparaiso. Valparaiso is really busy for those people, and it's never been. I advise you to go. It's busy. There are lots of people hustling. They're market stalls. They've got to make some money. They've got to drive to home, come back. Busy. And we started a conversation in the car about all of this energy. And what if that energy was about hustling for health? And I think that is a really useful way of thinking about how we get from here to there. How do we change that energy for something that is beneficial for us, not just now, but over the long term? Love questions. Are there people online doing questions in the chat as well?
Sorry, something about and what you're saying. Just, I think I'm very naive in politics and money, but I have a different point of view. I think that sometimes we concentrate on funding and the money and we stay there, but if you look at how things have happened in the world, Facebook, for example, didn't start with money. It started with moving people. If you can move people towards something, that's where the money will go. Because the people that are thinking about where they want to put their funds and think that you have mentioned something very important, that is being connected. I think that's what we're looking for right now. And after the horrible years of being discriminated and how to say, inside our houses, that we have really seen that being connected is something that can make us happy. I think I would guess it's something that everybody would say. I mean, somebody could say eating sugar, or somebody could maybe that would change. But being connected, maybe is the way to bring information, to set a value instead of health, and it will be good for your, I don't know, blood pressure. Maybe social. That's what you need to bring out, and that bring people's attention more.
I really like what Valeria is saying, because if you take the sea clavier in Bogota, it's the oldest sea clavier in the world. Probably there might be one in Brazil that's been there for 50 years. It starts with a handful of people and grew to 1.5 million people taking part. Of course, occasionally there'd be the politician that's trying to do away with it, but that's unthinkable now. And a lot of the problem in modern life is, in Spanish we say pertenencia, a sense of belonging. Many cities have such diverse communities that there is nothing that unites them. And the sea clavier is one of these things that has the potential to unite people if it goes across all socio-economic groups in a city like Bogota. It brings everybody out. If in Bogota something terrible happens, like the police beat somebody up on Wednesday, there will be more people on the sea clavier on Sunday because they are taking back their city and celebrating what is theirs. So yes, I like the idea of thinking together, and interestingly, Facebook has played an important role in bringing people to the sea clavier because it's a natural shared experience. I'll see you on Sunday. Yeah. I like the fact that we're all thinking bigger. The medical model that Dominic referred to hasn't worked. It's got us greater longevity, but not greater happiness, and greater morbidity. That's another conversation.
But it's related. So I spent a lot of time working with people who are older than me and thinking about what happens as we age. And one way of thinking about what old is that it's the ability to live with loss. So I am 57. I can no longer run up and down the stairs as I used to when I was 21. I can't eat all the foods I used to do, and my friends are increasingly getting sick around me, and they're starting to disappear and die off. It's difficult. So what's important for me is resilience and adaptability. It's the ability to change my understanding of myself, my sense of self-worth, self-narrative, and to adapt to who that I am now in an emotional way. And that requires, I think, other people. Other people are incredibly important for this navigating of our lives. And so connectivity has so many different values how we make it, but we tend to think about maybe that connectivity isn't possible in cities. I've lived in cities pretty much all my life, and the scale of a city changes depending on how you age. My good friend Emi Kyoto, who developed the Basho project, is currently working in Singapore with a big 30-year project looking at how do we age in cities where most people will age. And she's looking at what makes a micro-community, and the way that she does it, which is the important bit, is she starts by sitting down with older adults and saying, what works? How does it work for you? So it's very different than having a theory about what works and improving it. It's an emergent process of working, almost like gardening. I think it's maybe more akin to gardening than it is to anything else I can think of. That you have to nurture and connect several different types of nutrient in order to make things flourish. More questions, please. It's great. I have to think.
I have several questions. The first one, if do you have any collaboration or collaborative network here in Latin America?
Not
Or
yet.
no,
No.
not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, perfect.
It's a very early stage for us to start this.
Yeah,
And as people point out, there's fantastic projects that I know about, I've known about historically.
for that reason.
There are great education processes. And so I'm really looking forward to what we can learn together. So I think the idea that you arrive somewhere with all the ideas is a bad idea. What we look for as a process, and it kind of talks to this idea about, you walk into a room and sometimes people don't understand it. So what we think works is making a virtuous cycle. I have to stand in the camera so they can see. So the first thing is about curiosity.
Yeah.
It's about what's happening, what's going on there. The second thing is about inspiration. That thing is really fantastic. If you stop there, game over. So the third thing is about enabling and skilling and sharing whatever it is that people are curious about so that they can do it themselves. So it goes curiosity, inspiration, skilling, sharing. And that process is a virtuous circle. Often, you can think about it with small children. When you teach small children a new thing, quite often they go, I can tie my shoelaces, now I'm going to go and show my younger sister. Yeah? And that process works for individuals, communities, and it works for institutions. Institutions are very proud of the new thing that they can show off that they've just learned to do. Piece of research, whatever that is. So that process is really a valuable way of thinking. And that process produces its own ambassadors. And so the transformation process is an organic one that grows. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what we can do. And this is an exchange. There are lots of projects, including the ones I'm hearing about today, where I'm going, tell me more about that.
Yeah. And related with your festival, I didn't understand well, but your festival is like or kind of congress or something like that, because we are we are doing something. For example, for me, I love biomarkers, and it's like everything together talking about what you are doing.
Yeah. So let's start really small. So any gathering of people is a place to start a festival or a celebration. Yeah. A symposium, a conference. They have the same roots of celebration. Yeah. It's congregation. Yeah? Gathering people together in a place. So, first thing. The second thing is, if you think about the people, like the video, or groups of people, you can gather people together in different ways. So normally we all gather with the people that are like us. But if you gather people with new story, new ideas, then interesting things start to happen. So with the big festival, it was about starting small projects, and then outside of the festival time, I'm trying to work back to front of the video, connecting. So for example, we would start an event in the south, an event in the north. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then outside of the festival time, we would connect the people that ran those events, and they would develop the next thing. It's also about a different mechanic of ownership. So we weren't trying to make a festival that we branded and was out. We were trying to make something that moved. And so the Alternate, I started in 2006. It developed with a charity called Age and Opportunity. It's still going. They still run it. I left in 2014. By 2014, and since 2014, we've mentored and supported 14 festivals in different parts of the world. They're very different. The one in Singapore is not like the one in Scotland. Some of them have stopped being festivals. So the one in Scotland has become a development agency. Some have taken away the festival model and become a series of projects. So they evolve in really different ways. But the great advantage of the festival piece is that it uses showtime. It uses all of those tools of entertainment. And so it connects the entertainment and the social piece together. And we can see that happening around, in different ways. The WHO arts at the moment. So WHO, World Health Organization, started an arts department about 3 years ago, and started to do roadshows around the world, very much symposia plus what's happened locally. The other thing worth mentioning, and it came up yesterday, when we work in healthcare and we think about we think about the problems all the time. It's what we're hardwired to do. How do we fix the problems? And the problems are complicated and difficult. Yeah. Sometimes we should make some time to celebrate the things that work. And the great advantage of celebrating the things that work is that it encourages more activity. It makes movements. And it not only makes movements happen between people, we know that this is how behavior change works. In neuroscience, we know that this works. You do a good thing, you want to do more of the good thing, you do more of the good thing, and more dopamine. Yeah. So how do we work on what we know from the neurochemistry at a strategic level? We know, in behavioral marketing, when people want to sell us products, that's what they do. So in a way, we take some of the learning from that and think about it in terms of making health promotion.
Yeah.
It's a long answer.
Thank you very much.
Please.
Very, very interesting. um, when you were mentioning work in this way,
Yeah.
and which probably some of us think that you were a biologist or engineer. I don't know if you've heard of occupational therapy. And I shared it was very interesting to know how the occupational therapy profession began. It actually began as a feminist movement of nurses that had a man-led medical, and they said they were nurses. They with the names of God, Olympus, and giving organs down. And one of the many statements of that was that actually medicine is fantastic for when you're about to die, when you have a that case of the medical area is power. When they showed everybody that they controlled bacteria and viruses, that's when they became powerful. And the nurses said that's fantastic, but there are other things that medical model healthcare. And long ago, I healthcare patients were actually tied to their bed. And I'm not talking about 600 years ago. A couple of decades ago, they were tied. So the nurses said, wrong. So they started this movement, and now the profession of occupational therapy, where we believe that you don't need to fix people, you just need to give them what makes them happy and focus on well-being. That's why we don't get involved with doctors. They we don't really have much to talk about this. We talk about broken bones. But it's okay. But I think that's where the future of well-being is headed. I actually sometimes receive comments like, well, patients that have dementia and there's no cure for it and they're deteriorating, why are you spending so much time and effort on somebody that's going to get worse over time? And that's the medical point of view. I'm not talking about morality. I'm just talking about their tendency. And then when that's service, obviously you spend money because it's still part of your life. Still there. They're still alive. So I just wanted to share that it's a career that will jump into any project you say.
It also speaks to the complexity. So, and I think of it like a pendulum. Yeah. So we move to different ends of that pendulum, but the sweet spot is in the middle. So, if I have a heart attack, I don't want to meet an artist. Okay? I want someone who can fix this. Yeah. I want that skill. And so we need to rebalance the value system, sure. And yes, I started with Snoopy and Charlie Brown, but I could equally have started with Jane Tronto, American feminist philosopher who talks about the history of care, and she says it starts, it's gendered from the beginning. So men go to the Senate and the state, and women stay at home and do care. And the Republic has men at the centre of the state. And she says, how do we move care from the domestic into the centre of the state? How do we make care the centre of the apparatus of the state? How do we put care at the centre of the Republic? It's a fantastic question. Really great person to Google and to look up and to explore further. But yeah, there's a shift in the way that we do health. How do we make health? Not how do we get sick? How do we make health? And I think it's a big world. There's room for all of them, but the task is a rebalancing thing. Thank you. So much more I can do, but I won't. We create the future. Yeah, we make things up. So yeah, and it works. So there's the other thing to mention is about I suppose maybe I've done it already, but the way that people think. So we are Damasio's talk about we are feeling machines that think, not thinking machines that feel. Humans are feeling machines that think, not thinking machines that feel. So we are sensing all of this stuff all the time and processing it and making a narrative that's consistent. And so using something like dance, which isn't something that happens in these rooms, as an educational tool is fantastic. But when I saw you all come in this morning, some of you came in like this because you were tired, some of you came in heavy, so you're physically already in the conversation. But we don't think of that as pedagogy. We think of pedagogy as being something else. Or it's the dance pedagogy over there. So the more that you get into the kind of work I do, the more that you think about communication and transfer of information. You think about education. How can I dance my PhD? Yeah, it's a real question. There's a whole thing in the US about dancing a PhD. It's fantastic. Have a look at it. How can I dance neuroscience? Magda Kashmaska, a whole bunch of people looking at that. Partly as if I get a bunch of kids and I dress them as neurons and I get them to dance, they can understand how their brain works. And then actually they can take time out when they're stressed because they physically understand them. So it opens up emergent possibilities for what we do and the way that we work. And this is hopefully another part on that really, really exciting journey. The cultures that we have are thousands of years old. The way that we understand them through science is quite short. It's quite a recent thing. And to try and put those two together, I think is, when I think about the future and the scary bits of it, of which there are many, the hopeful bits are also in those places. So today we may not die. I choose to remain hopeful. Do we have time for one or two more? There's a few people in the chat. Maybe. I don't know. Can I open up the chat without wrecking the system? What's the next step? Yeah. Well, firstly, this helps to be able to do this and to exchange information is fantastic. There is only one of me. There are many of you. Creative Aging International is not a huge company. It's a small number of people. So what we found is that collaboration has to be key. We want to work with people that work with us. Working with people that don't want to work with us is like hitting my head against the wall. I don't need that. So that's the first thing. We get a chance to talk, which is fantastic. With Agustin, we have a few projects that we're ticking away at. I go back to Argentina tonight, and I do some lecturing next week, and I look forward to meeting those people. I know there are people on the Zoom call. Hi, Sylvia. Other people that would bring pieces of this weave together. So this is just an introduction. It's a first conversation. I really look forward to where we go next. And I think that one thing that's really important is making is quick. You can make something really quick. It doesn't need to be the best thing. It doesn't need to be perfect. You just make a version. And then tomorrow we make a better version, and we make a better version, and a better version. So I look forward to doing things to start with quite quickly and learning, figuring out what is happening as we make things and move on. It's a joy talking to you, even fast.